Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Friday, Yom Shishi. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house on a Friday? Bella in Florida, Gordo in Scotland, Melissa in Great Neck, Lucy, Minnesota, Renee in Indiana, Joe in the Inland Empire, Yehuda in South Carolina, Shandora in the Bronx. Chaim in Florida, Elise in Virginia, and Ella in Southern California. Welcome, everybody. Today's episode of AT Daily is sponsored by Stephen in New Hampshire. How are you, Stephen? In honor of Camila Giger. Stephen, thank you so much for enabling us to share more Torah with more people around the world. In the merit of that, may you and all your loved ones be showered in blessings. We say amen. This is our annual campaign. It's very important. We've got to hit our mark and raise the money so that we have the funds to run Accidental Talmudist, the website, the app, the webmaster, producing the content, all the maintenance that needs to be done, digital maintenance. There's actually quite a bit of work to do. Our fine young assistant here who helps us get everything done. It all costs money. We run a very, it's a meager budget. I mean, it's not like anyone's making any real money here, but it just costs money to keep the lights on at Accidental Talmudist. We are a non-profit. And so every donation is very dear to us and enables us to share more Torah with more people around the world. Donate.accidentaltalmudist.org. There's actually a candle. We're trying to light up the candle, right? It's like a thermometer there. So help us reach our goal. Please donate now in this donating giving season before the end of the year. Donate.accidentaltalmudist.org. Thank you so much for everyone that's already donated. Okay, our daf today is page 91 here in Tractate Zevachim, the 29th volume of the Talmud. And today, with God's help, we're going to finish chapter 10. Right now, we're continuing our discussion of Mishna number 3 here in chapter 10, which we're going to complete and do another Mishna number 4 with a short Gemara and then finish the chapter today. Okay, we got a good start on 91A, so we're about halfway down 91A already. So an additional dilemma with regard to precedence, right? We've been talking about that offerings which are brought more frequently are going to, if two offerings are going to be brought at the same time, and one is a more frequent offering, and the other is a less frequent offering, like a daily offering versus a Shabbos offering. So the more frequent offering goes first, really emphasizing that daily work, daily tasks. And also offerings of greater sanctity are going to precede offerings of lesser sanctity when they come at the same time. Okay, so an additional dilemma with regard to precedence was raised before the sages. If the priest had two offerings to sacrifice, a frequent offering and an infrequent offering. So the frequent offering goes first, but although he should have initially sacrificed the frequent offering, instead he slaughtered the infrequent offering first. So then what is the law? Do we say that since he slaughtered the infrequent offering first, he also proceeds to sacrifice it, right? Meaning, sacrifice doesn't mean kill the animal. Slaughtering is how we kill the animal. It's a very particular kind of killing. Slaughtering with a very sharp knife, one cut across the neck, etc. And then the blood is collected in a service vessel. Sacrifice in this context means that that blood which was collected, the blood of the soul when it was slaughtered, is conveyed to the altar and then sprinkled on the side of the altar. That's what sacrifice means. So he should have slaughtered the more frequent offering first. He didn't. He slaughtered the infrequent offering first. So that question is, should he complete the job now that he started the infrequent offering first, collected its blood, now convey it to the altar and sprinkle it? Or perhaps he does not yet sacrifice it, but rather gives the blood of the infrequent offering to another priest who stirs it to prevent it from congealing until he sacrifices the frequent offering, right? Slaughters and sacrifices the blood on the altar of the more frequent offering, and then he completes the job by bringing the blood to the altar of the infrequent offering, right? So do we interrupt the process, since he should have done the frequent offering first, to do that, slaughter it and sacrifice it and present its blood of the frequent offering, and then finish the job of the infrequent offering? Or now that he has begun the process with the infrequent offering, should he go ahead and finish it? That's the question. So Rav Huna from Surah said, come in here and answer from the Mishnah. If one has a peace offering from yesterday and a sin offering or a guilt offering from today, the peace offering from yesterday precedes the sin offering from today. And it can be assumed that the Mishnah is not discussing a case where none of the offerings have been slaughtered, as the peace offering would not take precedence in this situation. Rather, it must be discussing a peace offering that was slaughtered yesterday, but its blood has not yet been presented. So one can infer from this that only a peace offering from yesterday takes precedence in this situation, but in the case of a peace offering from today that is similar in other aspects to a peace offering from yesterday, the peace offering does not take precedence. So the Gemara explains, and what are the circumstances of this case? This is a situation where one first slaughtered the peace offering from today. In this case, the sin offering or guilt offering takes precedence, although the peace offering is already slaughtered, as both of them are of greater sanctity. So the same should apply to an infrequent offering that was slaughtered before a frequent offering. The frequent offering is slaughtered before the blood of the infrequent offering is presented, right? We interrupt the process of the infrequent offering, even though it's already been slaughtered. And so we do hand that blood off to another priest who stirs it so it doesn't, congeal. And then we slaughter the offering of greater sanctity, or the more frequent offering, collect its blood, convey it to the altar, sprinkle it, and then complete the process, according to what we've heard so far. But the Gemara rejects this answer. Perhaps when the Mishnah makes reference to a peace offering from yesterday and a sin offering or a guilt offering from today, the circumstances should be understood differently. How can you find these other circumstances? The Mishnah discusses a case where the priest already slaughtered both of them, the peace offering and the sin or guilt offering, and the blood of both awaits presentation on the altar. But had he not yet slaughtered both of them, but only the peace offering, then you can still raise the dilemma of whether the priest should set aside the blood of the peace offering in order to slaughter the sin offering first due to its greater sanctity. So, spoiler alert, where they ended up on this is that if you have slaughtered both, right, then you stir the blood of the less holy or the less frequent offering and bring the other one to the altar, complete its blood presentation, and then complete the presentation of the less frequent or less sacred offering. But if you've slaughtered, right, the less frequent or the less sacred offering, and you're asking, should you now interrupt that process to slaughter this other animal, the more frequent or more sacred? The answer is no. Once you started this process, you should have slaughtered the more frequent or more sacred offering first. You didn't. You made a mistake. Having made that mistake, we don't interrupt its process. We complete it and then move on to slaughter the other offering, right? So if both have been slaughtered, okay, then we're going to present the blood as it should be of the more frequent or more sacred. But if only one has been slaughtered, it was the wrong one to slaughter first, but only one has been slaughtered, we're going to complete its procedure, its sacrifice, its bringing the blood to the altar, and then move on to the other offering in its completion, in its completeness. Now, the Gemara cites another proof. Come in here, the aforementioned Baraisa. Alternatively, Beis Hillel say, with regard to the order of blessings in Kiddush, right, when we're sanctifying the day of Shabbos, for example, with regard to the order of blessings in Kiddush, the blessing on wine is recited frequently, and the blessing of the day is not recited frequently. And there is a principle: when a frequent practice and an infrequent practice clash, the frequent practice takes precedence over the infrequent practice. The obligation to recite the blessing of the day is due to the sanctity of Shabbos and applies at the start of Shabbos before wine is placed on the table. Nevertheless, the blessing on the wine takes precedence due to its frequency. So too, the slaughtering of the frequent offering should take precedence, even if the priest had already commenced the sacrificial rites of the infrequent offering. But the Gemara rejects that proof. Here too, with regard to Kiddush, the circumstances are different. Since wine is available when one recites Kiddush, and therefore the obligation of both blessings come together, and this means that it is comparable to a situation where one already slaughtered both animals, right? And so when we're making Kiddush, right, we do say the blessing over the wine initially, but we don't drink it. We complete the blessing of the Kiddush on Shabbos, and only then do we drink the wine. The Gemara cites another proof. Come in here, as Rabbi Yochanan says, the law is that a person prays the afternoon prayer and afterward the additional prayer, despite the fact that the obligation of the additional prayer applies first, which is similar to an offering that is slaughtered first. And the Gemara rejects this proof. Here too, since the time of the afternoon prayer has now arrived, one is obligated in both prayers. And again, this is comparable to a situation where one already slaughtered both animals. Rav Acha, the son of Rav Ashi, said to Ravina that an answer to this dilemma can be found in a Mishna in Tractate Pesachim 61a. If one slaughtered the Pesach, right, the Paschal offering when the temple is standing, the Pesach offering, when is it slaughtered? The afternoon before Pesach, before Passover begins that night. It's slaughtered in the afternoon, blood presented in the afternoon, but people don't eat it until that night, because they have to take it away from the temple and over to their, picnic site, campsite, where their group is waiting to partake of the Pesach. We only do that when the temple is standing. So in Pesachim 61a it says, if one slaughtered the Pesach before midday, that's a problem because that's too soon. Right? The Pesach is slaughtered at a very specific time. After midday, during the afternoon, and before nightfall on the afternoon before Pesach begins that night. So if one slaughtered the Pesach before midday, it is disqualified because it is stated in its regard in Exodus 12:6 in the afternoon. Torah is very specific. You shall slaughter it in the afternoon. If he slaughtered it before the daily afternoon offering was slaughtered, it is valid, even though the daily offering should be sacrificed first, but someone should stir its blood to prevent it from congealing until he slaughters and sprinkles the blood of the daily offering. Although the infrequent Pesach is already slaughtered, the priest first slaughters the frequent daily offering and then sprinkles the blood of the Pesach. But the Gemara rejects this as a proof as well for our initial question of, since he slaughtered the infrequent offering first, do we halt the blood procedure and go slaughter the frequent offering first? Sounds like that's what we do with the Pesach vis-a-vis the daily offering, but that's not going to be a proof that we use here. The Gemara rejects this proof. Here we are dealing with a case where he gave precedence to the daily offering and slaughtered it first, and then slaughtered the Pesach before sprinkling the blood of the daily offering. Since the blood of both offerings requires sprinkling on the altar, both have been slaughtered. Now we're going to bring the blood of the more frequent offering first. Rav Acha, the elder, said to Rav Ashi that the wording of the Mishnah is also precise, as it teaches until the blood of the daily offering is sprinkled. It does not teach until he slaughters and sprinkles the blood. This indicates that the daily afternoon offering has already been slaughtered. And since both animals have slaughtered, we're going to bring the blood of the more frequent offering first. And the Gemara affirms, conclude from its wording, that this is the meaning of the Mishnah. And finally, our final small comment on a small Gemara on Mishnah number 3. The Mishnah teaches, and with regard to all of the offerings that are eaten, the priests are permitted to alter the manner of their consumption and eat them as they choose. And the Gemara asks, what is the reason for this law? And the Gemara answers, the verse states, with regard to the gifts of the priesthood, of all the consecrated items of the children of Israel, to you have I given them le-moshcha. Numbers 18:8. And Targum Onkelos renders this term as for greatness, indicating that the flesh of the offerings should be eaten in the manner that kings eat their food, i.e. prepared in any way they want, right? The parts of sin offerings, for example, that are eaten by priests, they may eat them however they want. The only exception was they should not use teruma spices on them. Teruma is not a type of spice, it's a designation of spices that were used, that were given to priests as part of a tithing process by the person who grew the spice. But you know, as long as it's not consecrated spices, because that would shorten their deadline of when they need to be consumed by. But in terms of flavors of spices, manner of cooking, whatever the priests want to do is fine, so that they should enjoy the portions of sin offerings that have been given as a gift to the priesthood. That concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 3. We move on to Mishnah 4, the final Mishnah here in chapter 10 of Tractate Zevachim. Mishnah 4. Rabbi Shimon said, if you saw oil that is being distributed in the temple courtyard for consumption by the priests, and you seek to ascertain its nature. What is this oil? Why was it brought here? Why is it in the courtyard? Says Rabbi Shimon, you do not need to ask what it is. Rather, it is certainly left over from the oil of the wafers of the meal offering of Israelites after they smeared a bit of oil on them, or it is left over from the log of oil of a metzora after a small amount of the oil was placed on him. Those are the two places where oil is left over and given to the priests. If you saw oil that is placed on the flames of the altar in the manner of an offering, you also don't need to ask what it is. Rather, it is certainly left over from the oil of the wafers of the meal offering of the priests, or it is the leftover oil from the meal offering of the anointed priest, the Kohen Gadol, which requires a great deal of oil and which is burned in its entirety on the altar. And the Mishnah adds, one cannot say that the oil distributed to priests or burned on the altar was brought as a gift offering, as one may not contribute oil as a gift offering. But Rabbi Tarfon says one may contribute oil as a gift offering. That's Mishnah 4. Now the Gemara, and we're on 91b. Shmuel says, according to this statement of Rabbi Tarfon, that the oil may be sacrificed as a gift offering, in the case of one who contributes oil, a priest removes a handful of the oil and sacrifices it on the altar, and its remainder is given to the priest to eat it. What is the reason for the ruling of Shmuel? The verse states, and when one brings a meal offering, a korban mincha, in Leviticus 2:1, and the superfluous word korban teaches that one may contribute oil, and its status is like that of a meal offering. Just as with regard to a meal offering, the priest removes a handful and its remainder is eaten, so too with regard to oil, the priest removes a handful and its remainder is eaten. Rabbi Zera said that we learn this law in the Mishna as well. Rabbi Shimon said, if you saw oil that is being distributed in the temple courtyard, you do not need to ask what it is. Rather, it is left over from the oil of the wafers of the meal offerings of Israelites. Israelites meaning regular Jews as opposed to Levites or Kohanim. Or it is left over from the lug of oil of a Mitzorah, as one does not contribute oil as a gift offering. So Rabbi Zera learns by inference from the Mishnah that according to the one who says that one may contribute oil, it is distributed to the priest for consumption and it is not sacrificed entirely. Abaye said to Rabbi Zera, say the last clause of the Mishnah, if you saw oil that is placed on the flames of the altar, you do not need to ask what it is. Rather, it is left over from the oil of the wafers of the meal offering of priests, or it is left over from the meal offering of the anointed priest, as one does not contribute oil as a gift offering. Abaye learns by inference from the Mishnah that according to the one who says that one may contribute oil, it is burned in its entirety in the flames on the altar. And this contradicts Shmuel's statement that according to Rabbi Tarfon, only a handful of the oil is burned on the altar. Right? If you're going to bring oil as a gift offering, what is its destiny? Does it all get burned on the altar? Does some gets burned on the altar, the rest is given to the priest? Right? This is only according to the minority view that you can give oil as a gift. But according to that view, what is its destiny? And the Gemara comments, for Abaye, the inference from the first clause of the Mishnah is difficult, while for Rabbi Zera, the inference from the last clause is difficult. And the Gemara explains, granted, according to Rabbi Zera, the inference from the first clause that the oil is distributed for consumption by the priests can be explained as referring to the remainder of the oil, whereas the inference from the last clause that the oil is burned on the inference from the last clause that the oil is burned on the altar is referring to the handful removed from the oil. But according to Abaye, the contradictory inferences pose a difficulty. So the Gemara answers, one cannot infer anything from the first clause, as the Mishnah taught the first clause only due to the last clause, meaning as the Tana of the Mishnah wishes to teach the last clause in a certain manner, he teaches the first clause in a similar style, despite the fact that one might come to an erroneous conclusion from the wording of the first clause. And the Gemara asks, granted, a Tana may teach the last clause of a Mishnah due to the first clause, i.e. a Tana, right, these are the earlier sages of the Mishnaic period, that a Tana might teach in a similar formulation to one that he already used. But would a Tana teach the first clause of a Mishnah due to the last clause? He might teach the last clause in a parallel style to what he said in the first clause. Why would he do it backwards? So the Gemara answers, yes, they say in the West, Eretz Yisrael, they say in the West, meaning Eretz Yisrael, that a Tana taught the first clause due to the last clause. He styled the first clause in order to match the last clause. And the Gemara cites a proof where this has happened. Come in here, a baraisa, if one contributes wine, according to the statement of Rabbi Akiva that one may contribute wine, it is poured into the basins adjacent to the corner of the altar. If one contributes oil, according to the statement of Rabbi Tarfon, that one may contribute oil. Wine and oil are contributed, but usually they're accessory offerings, ancillary offerings that accompany something else. The question is, may a person give as a gift offering oil by itself or wine by itself? So these are the minority opinions that say you can. And what? Is it not possible? Well, according to Rabbi Tarfon, that one may contribute oil. If a person does contribute oil, it is burned. It is burned in the flames of the altar. It's not eaten by the priests. So what? Is it not possible to infer from the fact that the wine is poured in its entirety into the basins that the oil is likewise burned in its entirety in the flames of the altar, contrary to Shmuel's statement, right? If the wine is brought as a gift offering, no one drinks it. It's poured into these basins around the altar, but it's the equivalent of putting it, it's like a burnt offering that goes entirely consumed on the altar, right, into the flames of the altar. Why don't you just take the wine and pour it into the flames of the altar? Because the wine will douse some of the flames that it touches. As opposed to the oil can go up on the flames of the altar. It will just add fuel to the fire. Wine is consumed by the altar, but it goes into these basins, which then go into the drains and drain out under the altar. but in both cases, it's entirely consumed by the altar. The Gemara rejects this proof, however, and says, are the cases comparable? This case is as it is, and that case is as it is. The donations of wine and the donations of oil are not the same. They are separate cases. And the two statements of the Baraisa need not accord with each other. Just because oil can be given as a gift and is consumed by the altar flames does not tell us that wine may also be given as a standalone gift and that it is consumed by the altar. Rav Papa said that Shmuel's statement is like one side of a dispute between Tanaim. As it is taught in a Baraisa, one who contributes oil should not bring less than a log of oil, a volume of oil. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rabbi, says 3 log. The minimum measure, if you're going to bring oil, is 3 log. Right? So, like a cup that we use to wash our hands, that's a revis. That's a quarter log. So, a log, a full log, is sort of like, at least, probably like a liter. It's probably about a liter, more or less. And so if you're going to bring oil as a standalone gift, Rabbi says it has to be 3 log, like 3 liters of oil. It's not insignificant. And the Gemara asks, with regard to what principle do the first Tana and Rabbi disagree? The sages said this before Rav Papa. They disagree with regard to the nature of an inference by means of verbal analogy or juxtaposition. Is the second case equated to the primary case in all aspects, in accordance with the exegetical principle of infer from it and again from it? Or does the comparison extend only to one specific issue derived from the primary case, in accordance with the principle infer from it but interpret the law according to its own place? In all other aspects, the cases are not equated. Right? Just because you learn something out from the fact that oil can be brought as a gift or wine can be brought as a gift doesn't mean that you're going to extend all the particulars of bringing wine as a gift to bringing oil as a gift and vice versa. Now, the Gemara explains that this is the difference between them. As the rabbis hold by the principle, infer from it and again from it. And the Gemara explains the application of this principle in here, in our situation. Just as a meal offering is contributed, so too oil is contributed, as inferred from the verse addressing the meal offering. And again, one infers from this source, just as a meal offering requires a log of oil to accompany it, so too here an offering of oil alone must be a log of oil. And just as with regard to a meal offering, the priest removes a handful and its remainder is eaten, so too with regard to oil, the priest removes a handful, right, for the altar, and the remainder is eaten. So you would compare them in all respects, a meal offering to a standalone oil offering. The other view comes from Rabbi, who holds by the principle, infer from it, but interpret the law according to its own place. So in this situation, what does that mean? One infers from the case of a meal offering that just as a meal offering is contributed, so too oil is contributed. But with regard to all other aspects of this law, interpret the law according to its own place. And its status is like that of wine libations, which are similar to oil in that they are also poured onto the altar. So just as one contributes libations of 3 log and no less, so too when one contributes oil, one contributes 3 log and no less. And just as libations are poured in their entirety into the basins, that's how the altar consumes wine, so too, if you bring oil as a standalone item, it is entirely consumed by the altar, but since it doesn't extinguish flames, you can apply it directly to the flames of the altar pyre. Rav Papa said to Abaye, if Rabbi cited the source of the gift offering of oil from the verse addressing the meal offering, he would not disagree with the rabbis, as everyone employs the principle of infer from it and again from it. Rather, Rabbi derives the gift offering of oil from a verse that deals with libations. In Numbers 15:13 it says, all that are home-born, right, who are raised in the land of Israel, shall do these things after this manner in presenting an offering made by fire. Rabbi derives from here that just as one may contribute wine libations, so too one may contribute oil. Therefore, Rabbi compares oil to wine libations, and just as one contributes libations of 3 log, so too, if one is contributing oil, he must contribute 3 log of oil. Rav Huna, the son of Rav Nassan, said to Rav Papa, how can you say that? I.e., that according to Rabbi, the source of the gift offering of oil is not from the meal offering. Right? Why would we learn the laws of a oil offering from the laws of a meal offering, which is a solid, right, wheat flour, sometimes barley flour? Because when we bring a meal offering, it must be accompanied by oil, right? So that's why we might learn from there. But says Rav Huna, but isn't it taught in a baraisa with regard to the verse, and when one brings a meal offering, a korban mincha, in Leviticus 2:1, that the superfluous word korban teaches that one may contribute oil? And the baraisa continues, and how much must one contribute? 3 log. And the Gemara explains the question, and whom did you hear who says the gift offering of oil is 3 log? Well, this is the opinion of Rabbi. And yet, he cites the source of the gift offering of oil from the word korban, which is referring to the meal offering. So Rav Papa said to him, if this baraisa is taught, it is taught, and I cannot take issue with it. 3 log refers to wine, liquid libation, right? When you talk about the meal offering, it is accompanied by oil, but it's only 1 log. So if you're going to bring oil by itself, 3 log or 1 log, you can see what the conflict is. Shmuel says, one who contributes wine brings it and sprinkles it on the flames of the altar. What is the reason? The verse states, and you shall present for the libation half a hin of wine for an offering made by fire of a pleasing aroma to the Lord. The verse indicates that there is a type of wine libation, which is an offering made by fire. The Gemara challenges that and says, but he thereby extinguishes the fire on the altar. And the Torah states, a perpetual fire, an eish tamid, shall be kept burning on the altar, it shall not go out. This is often cited as a kind of spiritual lesson, you know, an eish tamid, a fire, a perpetual fire, an eternal fire, like in our souls. We need to have a fire for Torah, a fire for doing God's will perpetually within us. But the term itself, right, comes from here, keeping the fire burning on the altar. A perpetual fire shall be kept burning on the altar. It shall not go out. Leviticus 6:6. So the Gemara explains, extinguishing in a partial manner is not called extinguishing. In other words, this act is not included in the prohibition, right? They're saying if you pour wine on the altar fire, it might not extinguish the whole bonfire. And it's true that wine has alcohol in it, but not a great deal. And so if wine lands on, you know, just a portion of the fire, there's the coals and wood, it's going to at least temporarily extinguish a little bit of that fire. So you might think that that is prohibited. They're saying here, well, just a little bit of extinction is not extinguishing the fire, so it's not going to violate any prohibition according to this view. Now the Gemara challenges that and says, oh, is that so? But doesn't Rav Nachman say that Rabbi Bar Avu says one who takes down a coal from upon the altar and extinguishes it is liable for violating the prohibition, it shall not go out? And the Gemara answers, well, this statement is referring to a situation where there is only this coal on the altar, and therefore the fire is entirely extinguished if you extinguish that coal. And if you wish, say instead that even if partial extinguishing is prohibited, extinguishing for the sake of a mitzvah, as in the case of sprinkling wine on the altar, is different and would be permitted. Okay, it's going to put out a little piece of the fire, but it's for the purpose of bringing the offering of wine on the altar. That's why it's an exception. The Gemara challenges that too and says, come in here, a baraisa that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov teaches. Since the Torah gave a mitzvah, remember, mitzvah, often translated as good deed, does not mean good deed. Mitzvah means commandment, right? It's good when we follow God's commandments. That's why that meaning kind of came into the vernacular, but it means commandment. Okay? So Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov teaches, since the Torah gave a mitzvah to remove the ashes of the offerings from the altar, one might have thought that it is permitted to extinguish the coals so that they become ashes and then to remove them. Therefore you say, he shall not extinguish. In accordance with the verse, it shall not go out. Although this is a case of extinguishing for the sake of a mitzvah, right? It's a mitzvah to remove the coals. So you might have thought, okay, well, I want to, extinguish the fire so that there are coals and ashes that I can remove, not coals, ashes. He's going to extinguish the coals so that there are ashes to be removed from the altar. And so it would be the case of violating this prohibition of it shall not go out in order to enable us to carry out the command, to fulfill the commandment of removing ashes from the altar. Although this is a case of extinguishing for the sake of a mitzvah, the Baraisa still says prohibited. It is prohibited to do that. And the Gemara explains it is different there, as it is possible for the priest to sit and wait until the coals become ashes and then remove them. By contrast, with regard to wine, there is no alternative to sprinkling the wine on the fire, and therefore it is permitted, even though it would extinguish a little piece of the fire. But the Gemara challenges this view and says, come in here, a baraisa that prohibits sprinkling wine on the fire of the altar, period. If one contributes wine, according to the statement of Rabbi Akiva, that one may contribute wine, you may contribute wine, you may bring it as an offering, a standalone offering, but when you do that, the altar does not consume the wine by throwing it on the fire that is on top of the altar. Rather, says Rabbi Akiva, such wine brought as an offering is poured into the basins on the altar. If one contributes oil, according to the statement of Rabbi Tarfon, that one may contribute oil, it is poured onto the flames of the altar. And it is furthermore taught in a baraisa the wine libation is poured into the basins. And so the Baraisa suggests, or perhaps it is not so. Rather, it is poured onto the flames. Therefore, you say, he shall not extinguish. So remember, there's a view that we don't bring wine as a standalone libation. But if it is brought as a standalone offering, then we still have this dispute. Is it poured into the basins or is it poured right onto the fire? And the Gemara answers, this is not difficult, as that Baraisa is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that even an unintentional action, i.e. a permitted action from which a prohibited action inadvertently ensues, is prohibited. And this statement of Shmuel is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who maintains that a permitted action from which a prohibited action inadvertently ensues is permitted. This dispute between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon we encountered a lot near the beginning of our journey when we were in tractates Brachos and Shabbos. Specifically, when people had dirt floors. On Shabbos, could you move a heavy chair, like a big heavy chair, a heavy wooden table, across the dirt floor of a house? You can move furniture on Shabbos, right? People do it all the time. Extra guests come over. We bring over some chairs to the dining table. Of course, you can move chairs on Shabbos. But if it's a heavy chair and a dirt floor, and you're going to drag the chair, then you're going to create a furrow in the dirt floor. And creating a furrow is one of the kinds of labor that is prohibited on Shabbos because it's related to farming and to production, right? The beginning of raising crops is creating a furrow in the ground into which you'll put the seeds. So Rabbi Yehuda says, you can't drag that chair because it's possible you'll create a furrow. Even though you're not trying to create a furrow, that would be an unintended consequence of moving a chair, which is a permitted activity. But since it's very possible that you'll create that furrow, Rabbi Yehuda prohibits moving the chair in that situation. Rabbi Shimon would say it's not your intention to create a furrow. And so as long as it's not 100% guaranteed that a furrow will ensue when you move that chair, it's permitted to move the chair. But Rabbi Shimon will concede that if it's so heavy and the floor and the dirt is so soft that it's guaranteed that you're going to create that furrow, then even Rabbi Shimon would say you can't move the chair. But as long as it's only possible that you'll create the furrow, since that's not your purpose in moving the chair, Rabbi Shimon would let you move it. Again, Rabbi Yehuda would prohibit. So let's see how those views apply here. Right, the idea here where if you're going to put wine on the fire, is it only possible that you're going to extinguish some flame and therefore Rabbi Yehuda would prohibit and Rabbi Shimon would permit? Or is it definite that you will extinguish some of the flame and therefore even Rabbi Shimon would prohibit? So let's see. So this is not difficult, as that baraisa is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that even an unintentional action, i.e. a permitted action from which a prohibited action inadvertently ensues, is prohibited. And this statement of Shmuel is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who maintains that a permitted action from which a prohibited action inadvertently ensues is permitted. So the Gemara asks, is this to say that Shmuel holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon? But doesn't Shmuel say one may extinguish a piece of white-hot metal in a public thoroughfare on Shabbos so that the masses will not be injured by it, but one may not extinguish a wood coal because extinguishing it is prohibited by Torah law. And if it enters your mind that Shmuel holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, it should be permitted to extinguish even a wood coal. Rabbi Shimon maintains that extinguishing a coal is prohibited by Torah law only when one intends to use the extinguished coal. Otherwise, this constitutes a labor performed on Shabbos, which is not necessary for its own sake, which is not prohibited by Torah law. We're at the top of 92a. I'm almost finished. Questions or comments, please get them in now. Which is not prohibited by Torah law. So the Gemara answers, Shmuel's statements are not contradictory. As with regard to an unintentional act, he holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. But with regard to labor not necessary for its own sake, he holds that it is prohibited by Torah law in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rav Huna says, with regard to wine libations that become tameh, ritually impure, one prepares for them an arrangement of wood by themselves and burns them there. Not on the altar fire. You're going to have to destroy this because it became tameh. There's nothing else you can do. Where are you going to do it? You're going to put in a fire. Which fire? Not the fire of the altar, just another fire specifically for disposing of sacred offerings that became tameh and therefore can't go up on the altar. So with regard to wine libations that became tameh, one prepares for them an arrangement of wood by themselves and burns them there without removing them from the temple courtyard. Right? So it's a special fire in the temple courtyard. And this is due to the fact that it is stated with regard to a disqualified sin offering, in the sacred place it shall be burned with fire. Leviticus 6:23. And this requirement of burning it in the sacred place applies to all offerings that are meant to be sacrificed on the altar, but can't be sacrificed on the altar because they became disqualified, in this case by becoming ritually impure, tameh. And this is also taught in a baraisa with regard to the blood, the oil, the meal offerings, and the libations that became tameh. One prepares for them an arrangement of wood by themselves and burns them there. And the Gemara relates, Shmuel said to Rav Chana of Baghdad, bring me an assembly of 10 men, and I will tell you in their presence this law that I wish to disseminate. With regard to libations that became ritually impure, tameh, one prepares for them an arrangement of wood by themselves and burns them there. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah 4, the final Mishnah of chapter 10, and therefore we are done with chapter 10. We will continue tomorrow night, Saturday night. Last week I think I got up like 6:30. 6:30 was a better estimate because candle lighting I think is 4:26. We're going to finish Shabbos 5:30, but then we do Mariv, then I come home, then we do Havdalah. So by the time I get on the air tomorrow night, probably about 6:30 p.m. More or less here at Pacific time. Okay, and we'll open chapter 11. Okay, just a couple of comments. Let me see. From Joe. When the priests were stirring blood to prevent coagulation while waiting its turn to be sprinkled, were they stirring with their hand or was a spoon-like implement used? Wonderful question. I have to imagine that they used some sort of service utensil, right? We know they had service vessels into which the blood was collected and which sanctified that blood. When it was collected in a service vessel, I just think like it must have been some kind of service utensil used to stir it. Because they don't, we know that if, like, for example, they captured the blood in their hands, that would not sanctify it. It needed to be in a service vessel. I suppose they could stir it with their finger. I don't know why that would be prohibited, just off the top of my head, but it is somewhat disgusting. And so I think that the stirring was done, with some kind of an implement. But I'm kind of guessing here. I don't have a guaranteed yes answer for you on that. It's just my instinct is telling me that it was some kind of service utensil. Lucy, wine libations and other liquids, how can you burn them on the fire? Well, I mean, if you're sprinkling them a little bit at a time, it's going to vaporize, right? It's not really burned, it's more vaporizing. And so it's possible to put it on the fire. But yeah, I mean, if you take a big quantity of wine and pour that onto even a raging bonfire, there's the fire where it lands, it's going to be a little bit extinguished, right? Let's assume that the fire is big enough that it's going to overcome whatever little piece of the fire, was wetted and extinguished, and the fire will sort of, reinvade that part of the wood where that wine landed and keep the fire going. But this is why they had that debate, and why Rabbi Akiva said, no, the wine doesn't go on the fire. The wine goes into the basins, and from there to the drains under the altar. And it's one of those interesting questions where there must have been an answer, right? When the temple was standing and they were actually bringing those libations, there must have been an answer. And it's interesting that the tradition among the priests was lost to the extent that when these sages are debating these laws a few hundred years later, they're answering the question based on what the Torah would demand, not how the priests who served in the temple for, over 800 years, whatever their practices developed to be, and they probably just had that answer. But the sages went back to the text themselves, and because maybe it's possible that some priests interpreted it wrong early in the first temple period, or even somehow they had a tradition in the times of the tabernacle that there was an answer to this. But when they went from the small portable altar to the large fixed altar in the Temple of Solomon, they developed a new answer at that time. But then eventually, by the time the second temple was destroyed, the knowledge of what that answer was either lost, or maybe they just got it wrong. Like I said, maybe they got it wrong at some point, and that's why the sages were sort of deriving for the first time what the answer should be. And then in terms of oil, that's a liquid, but oil should burn, right? Oil burns. And so it seems no one is arguing that you could put oil directly on the fire. Okay, that's what I've got for us today. And with God's help, see you tomorrow, Saturday, probably around 6:30, maybe just a little later. And we'll open chapter 11 and page 92. All the best. Good Shabbos. And when does Hanukkah start? Is that Sunday night or Saturday? Sunday night. Okay, so we'll see each other before Hanukkah, God willing. All the best. Good Shabbos.